Good afternoon. My name is Tim Markle. I am, one of the things that I am, and we'll figure out more of what I am later, but one of the things that I am is director of the Southern Regional Center for Children and Youth with Special Healthcare Needs. We're based out of Madison. We cover 14 counties in Southern and Southwest Wisconsin, including the fabulous county of Grant, which will become really important to us shortly. First of all, this is Conversations are showing up for kids. A chance that we hopefully have a weekly opportunity to talk with some folks, have a casual conversation about topics that are of interest to parents and families of children who have special health care needs. Which brings me to my other role, which is as a dad, is that I'm the father of a 23-year-old on the autism spectrum. And so this is also part of life that I've lived. But as everybody knows, spectrum means you're all over the place. And so my kid has autism not in the same way that other kids have autism, and other kids' autism expresses itself differently. So it's highly individualized, as it is with a lot of developmental disabilities. Why? Because our kids are humans first, and they get to have that individuality, and we all get to be individuals. But today, the reason I mentioned my son's age is we're going to be talking transition and when do families need to start thinking transition. And so we've invited Rose Cutting to come on back to Conversations Are Showing Up for Kids. Rose is founder leader for Aiming for Acceptance, as well as I don't know what we're going to call it, but the what hopefully will be an ongoing event, Harnessing Abilities, in Southwest Wisconsin as well. And she is also a parent, and I'll let her tell you all those roles. I can't keep everything straight for everybody. So Rose, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for asking me back again, Tim. Hopefully it's on demand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So for people that are listening, is we're joking around, is we actually had what we considered to be a good sign up for today's show. Around 10 people said, oh my gosh, this is a topic I'd really like to be a part in. And none of them have showed up. And in the world of COVID/Zoom/virtual, this really has stopped being strange. 2 years ago, if we had done something like this, number one, it would have been weird to do something like this. And number two, it would have been weird to put on an event and not have anybody show up. Now, it just is what it is.
It is.
People get busy, and it's okay. You go on, you just keep moving forward. So with that, Rose, tell me a little bit about tell us a little bit about your family and why the topic of transition matters to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Tim, for this opportunity again. We are located down here in Southwest Wisconsin and have a family of 5, of which our oldest is on the spectrum. He is not quite to the age of your son where you are with the transition activities and whatnot, but I'm going to blink and it's going to happen, right? His dad and I run a farm. His dad's also in education. I try to help families and educators or anybody in Southwest Wisconsin. And so even having those roles and opportunities and exposure to things, you'd think maybe we would be on our game for knowing how to help our son through the transition process, right? But I think every day we wake up and have to learn something else or help empower somebody that we would have hoped had the knowledge of what to help our son with and so forth, and find out they too have no idea what the next steps or what transition is. So it's kind of one of those learn as you go and then kind of reach behind you and pull the next one up, right? So that's kind of what we all do in the Midwest. And
True.
Hopefully, even though it's just you and I today, which is always a good thing, right? You and I can always manage to talk to each other for a while, but
I always learn more about farming, rural communities, number of different subjects, running a little learning center in the middle of a town. I always learn stuff, so it's always good.
Yeah, but one of the main things that I think all of us with those with I just read this little side note. I've struggled the past year with using the word disability, and I always try to find a different way to say it. In the other day, I came on a phrase called developmental differences, and I thought, I'm going to try that one out for a while. So I'm going to try that with you today a little bit, Tim, and say that um, having things recorded now for those to access when they need them, no matter what time of day or what stage they're in. Tim, I think it's going to be a good thing. You doing all these videos and having people be able to access them as they need them. I think that's more important than how many people you entered into a Zoom room right now. So
Thank you so much for that. And when I need to put that on my end of the year report, I will give you a call and I will let you know to write that up. That'd be very helpful.
you do that. You do that.
So pick one of those things, Rose, that you wish you would have known about transition sooner. It sounds like there were maybe a couple of surprises or stuff that you like learned the day of, or that you're just like, wow, I didn't know I had to consider that. Some of those surprises, what's an example of one of those?
Well, Tim, I'll take you all the way back to when our journey first started. And we were in the very first educational meeting at our school district with the early childhood. And it wasn't that it was a bad meeting or anything like that. Not in the least. It was an informative meeting for my husband and I to start getting to know more about our son and what we would have to know. And one of the first questions they asked was, where do you see your son when he transitions out of the K-12 system? Where do you see his career? Where do you see his interest? And at that time, we were still about, was it 2 weeks away from his 4th birthday?
Oh, wow.
And and all I could think of was, if you can tell, and I actually, I mean, Tim, you know me, but those that'll be watching this, who knows when, um, all I could, I say my piece sometimes, and I said, if you can tell me a job where my son doesn't have to be potty trained, he doesn't have to know verbal language, and he can basically get paid with little to no skills, that's the job for my son. And I know now that was probably pretty harsh. Well, I knew back then too, but I thought, what a question to ask when the little guy, isn't any of those things. And we just got handled this diagnosis of autism and apraxia speech and sensory processing disorder, right? And we're new parents. This is our first child, so we have
Right.
nothing to base this on, right? So I remember thinking then, what an absurd question. Don't we have other things to focus on? But Tim, now that we are 16 years old, going to be 17 in this year, I'm grateful they asked that question, because I've used it many times in many different conversations. And I think one of the surprises that surprises me most is how early we not only needed to educate ourselves, but our son on what his options were to turn an interest into a career. Which, if you think about it, I mean, you and I are going to joke about agriculture things and everything, right? Because that's kind of my background.
And I have no idea
so
what
to
you're
speak.
talking about. Right.
Right? Yeah.
Right.
For once, I can be the smart one.
You are so smart in so many ways, but anyway.
But, as a young child, I myself, and I kind of hope almost every child, takes what's a strong interest of theirs and then is able to turn it into a successful career. Okay. I chose agriculture. Why do we think? Because my son and your son and others have different abilities, why do we not give them the benefit of the doubt that an interest of theirs can't be turned into a successful career?
There is so much in that to unpack, Rose. I mean, that is just, you packed a lot into just a few statements. And the first thing that strikes me is this whole idea of expectations and what we expect out of our kids. And I know families who, you know, the complexity of some of their children are such that they're going to listen to this and go, expectation. I am hoping, you know, they aren't, you know, big grandiose plans, but there have to be some sort of plans, because if not, we have our kids that if we just label them, as you said, you know, disabled or disability or differently abled, if we don't think about what their interests are and their options and dream about how they want to live, then they're probably going to just learn to exist instead of thrive. And those wanting high expectations, you know, the wonderful educator who asked you that question may have been trying to see what sort of expectations you had for your son and what the expectations might be, and were you, you know, willing to see him apart from his disability, but also taking that into account with his future. So it may not have been I could see where the question came from. It may not have been asked in exactly the perfect way, but how did you start to have because it sounds like, I mean, it's very similar. When my son was, you know, we didn't get a diagnosis until he was an adult, but we knew there was something going on early on. And, you know, all of a sudden my expectations changed, and I had to change what my expectations were. When did you know, was there a time where you sat there and found yourself going, you know what, I need to rethink this and start to have goals and start to have expectations and start to believe that my son's going to be doing something?
So as with all of this, I think that's a many layered question, right? And I don't know, Tim, and this is one of the points I wanted to make, is I don't know so much as if it was mine or my husband's realization of this, as much as it was our son proving so many things that we were told he would never do wrong. And all of a sudden, okay, so what's the saying? If you want to know how to treat somebody that's different or not, you know, the norm, look at what their sibling does, right? And so I would say for our family, and hopefully for a lot of people, it was our son directed. He didn't know he was ours. We're kind of behind the game in that we're just starting to really focus on and teach our son what his abilities are and so forth. And I did that because a while ago I got to meet the wonderful Dr. Temple Grandin, and a person in front of me in line was standing there, and they said, how do I tell my child that they have different abilities? You know, how do I tell them they have autism? And she came back with 3 very poignant questions. She said, do they have friends? Do they have the ability to work or follow directions? And are they able to exist without you doing everything for them? And the young lady in front of me was like, said yes to all of them. And she said, well, why are you going to give them a label for a crutch? And I just got thinking of that. Now, my husband and I neither one of us tend to be a crutch user for anything, but a kid is a kid, right? And so to this point in our son's life, we've actively kind of just held back on telling him some things until he asks a question. So I would say that the aha moments came when his sisters would actually start saying, why are you treating our brother different than us? Well, because, and they're like, no, there's no because. We did that same thing and we got told XYZ, right? But then that started being our son's friends. Now he doesn't, I don't want to make it sound like, he calls them and hangs out and everything with them and so forth. We're not to that socialization level. But they challenge him. They treat him like a sibling too. And when they come in the house and they say, come on, Asa, we're going up to the park or something. And he's like, why? They don't take why for an answer. They just grab him and they go, So I would say the thing that spearheads more of his interactions and his growth are a combination of himself, his siblings and friends, and the fact that my husband and I know very well he's going to have to, and he wants to exist without mom and dad being next to this adult. So it's kind of those realizations that put our plans in place of where we go and what we do on how to build him up and support him in this.
And it sounds like a lot of that started with really getting to know him as an individual, that every individual, no matter what the ability, has strengths. They're stronger in some areas. Every individual on this earth is a little bit weaker in other areas that there's some parts of our life that we just don't get. And they can be explained to us time and time again, and we still just don't get them. I have areas like that. True. I refuse to recount them on the recording, but I do. We all do. And so understanding which of those areas our children have where they are strong and learning to work on those strengths so they get stronger, to feed those strengths and encourage those strengths while not ignoring those areas they may need to at least develop some sort of competency in, but also not focusing so hard on the weakness that all we see is what they can't do. Is focusing on, well, given who they are, given their interest, given their capabilities, what is it they want to do? And what is it that I can help them learn how to do better?
Yeah. I can't agree with that more. And the reason that I know that is, you watch everybody, right? And where do we need support and where do we not need support? And you know what? Some of those people that need that support have no label whatsoever.
Right.
And some of them do, but who cares?
Yeah. What if we got supports according to our needs instead of our diagnosis?
Well, now you're just dreaming.
I know. What a concept. Well, not the topic of this conversation, but dang it all. That is such a good topic all on its own. Except I don't know who the expert would be in that, because I struggle with that as well. So how did you start to develop your son's interests? I mean, how did he become interested in things?
Well, I think that's one of, sometimes, like you say, we focus on the weakness or we focus on the negative, right? And so that's why there's a lot of times I like to point out what the positives are of autism, because especially in our world, by gosh, as much as I know about cows, I know nothing about dinosaurs. And, I'm just going to say this because this is recorded and hopefully someday my son watches this if he chooses to have a family or something. But the first word out of the little guy's mouth was not mom. And, like I alluded to earlier, he struggles with some speech impediment. And no, his first word was brontosaurus.
Nice.
Yeah. yeah, mom would have been easier, but we'll fly with that. But so watching him and seeing that animals and specifically dinosaurs to start with, but that quickly became into most animals, that was something he and I could relate with. That was something, but it meant, so okay, Tim, you know this, but I have a grandma that used to have a saying that was can't never even tried, right? And so when we went to the wonderful Wiseman Center and had our son diagnosed, I now understand now why they were prepping us for so many things that our son probably would not have been able to do, because they didn't know us. They didn't know what resources he would have. They didn't know him. Okay. But what they didn't know about myself was, go ahead and tell me something that I can't do, because it's going to become a lifelong mission, right? And meeting people along the way and having them tell us their stories or their expertise, and allowing us to take from those conversations and apply it towards our son, allowed us to keep engaging him in his interests. You know, okay, a cow isn't a brontosaurus, buddy, but a cow also, needs to live and breathe. So how are they the same? And that being said, we also found a very need to say, we realize this is an interest of yours. However, you still need to know these other things. And it's funny you use the word strength, because our son is a visual learner, an incredible visual learner. And that I used to get really scared about how much time he was on his iPad, right? And now whenever he wants to communicate something with me and is struggling to do that, he'll actually bring me a video or a song, or even he's found comic books online and he'll have me read a comic book. Okay, so somehow, some way, genetically or natural, our son has that part of him that's motivated to be part of the world, but at his level, right? He can't come to me like his sister can and say, I don't want to go to homecoming because I don't want to dress up. What he did was found a video clip of two characters basically asking their mom, why do you want me to go do these dances and all this thing at high school when there's so much wrong in the world that needs to be fixed? you
Valid.
know, right. But right now, if anybody's listening to this, even if your child is nonverbal, they're communicating with you and they're telling you something that you can build on. I got to know a gentleman from a training I took last year that he's totally housebound and even talks through an augmentative device. And this gentleman is actually designed software programs. So would his parents have ever seen this little guy in their house making more money than they made from his bed? Tim, I think the best thing you and I can empower people to do is keep talking, keep networking. Go ahead and have those days where you say I can't, and then wake up tomorrow and say, but I must.
Yep. Well, I love, so far, some of the things that I picked up are, our topic of when to start thinking about transition. It really is same time we do with every kid. And that's, we start when they're little and we start looking at their interests. We start looking at their abilities and we start dreaming with them. And we start to figure out how can we help them get to their dreams. And that is feeding in the interest, providing supports where necessary. But then the area where I struggled in and where I still struggle in, and where, when I have those days that I feel like a bad parent, because I do have those days where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst parent in the world. I can't believe that my kids are still alive. Is that, one of the things that, my son had a certain degree of social anxiety. And so, it took us a while to figure out how to help him integrate into groups and be a part of crowds of more than 5 people. And so he missed out on some of the exposure. And so it's not just an interest, but then how do you expose them? Being able to expose them to something around their interest, whether it's through a museum, whether it's through someone else's job, whether it's through a friend who does something similar to what they're thinking about doing, is exposing them to expand their knowledge about what is this topic around. Like if my son would decide to be a writer, then I'd probably want to expose him to other people who are writers. I mean, this is a kid who in high school, it was literally almost, pulling teeth. Like, I will pull your teeth if you do not write that essay. It was painful. And now he loves sitting downstairs and writing up stories. And he never really wanted to learn typing, but somehow he's managed to use a keyboard. And so, again, like you were saying, is they're finding their abilities may come out in different ways than what we normally would expect. And knowing our kid and being open to that communication, being open to what they're saying, being open to how they are and who they are, can help reveal how to help them grow up into becoming the adults that they are.
Yep, I agree totally with that. And while you were talking, I just got thinking to myself that one of the characteristics of our son's autism is twofold. One, he's a huge people pleaser. Mm. He's going to tell you what he thinks you want him to say. So you have to watch for the key phrases or that little twist of the head and so forth and give him, in situations, give him the okay that you don't have to tell me what you think I want you to say, Mm-hmm. But the other thing with him is he is a rule follower. Only in the past year or so has he kind of started, and yet he'll kind of complain about something why he's doing it, right? So I'll use this year. He went to his first homecoming dance, right? And he, again, you heard me say, why do you want me to go and do this? And at first I was going to back down because I knew if he was doing it, he was going to do it because mom said so. And he wanted to make me happy and he wanted to follow the rule. And I was going to back down until, again, his sibling came up and said, if you let him out of this, I'm driving him up there. I looked, right. Yeah. And I looked at her and I said, why? And she goes, because he doesn't know what he doesn't know. And he doesn't know that his friends want him there and that it'll be fun. And he doesn't have to stay all night, but he does have to go. And I listened to her. Even though she's, preteen, she's got some smarts to her. And he ended up going and had a great time in our special education. One of the special education directors down here in Southwest Wisconsin even used, so the after party for the sophomores was across the street at a friend's house. So the parents all came in our driveway and we just kind of hung out. So we were around, but not around, right? And pretty soon the little guy comes bouncing over and I said, where are you going? He says, I'm fine. And he came back out of the house a few minutes later and had changed all his clothes. And I'm like, were you cold? And he's like, no, bye. And left. And all of a sudden the other parents start laughing. I'm like, what? And they're like, Rose, he's in all black. And a few minutes later, back behind our house, we could hear a whole bunch of laughing. They had talked, his friends had talked him into, and he totally bought into it because he came home and changed his clothes into going out in toilet paper. Exposure for these kids might have to be a little bit of a you have to. And hopefully those exposures turn into a want to. But how many, Tim, I'm scared to do things. You talked me into doing this a few months ago, and I constantly say, what is anybody gonna learn from me? I have so much to learn, right? I'm scared to do this. But now you and I can have a conversation and we can hopefully help somebody.
Absolutely. And I love that balance. It's so hard as a parent to find that balance. And one of the keys to find that balance is knowing your kid, but also understanding, when is it my fear that's getting in the way of my child doing something? Am I afraid that they're going to fail and feel bad? Well, they're going to need to learn how to deal with that, because guess what? We're all going to fail and we're all going to feel bad in life. Am I afraid they're going to be rejected? They might be. And guess what? We're all going to be rejected at some point in our life, and we need to help our kids and ourselves deal with that. Now, that's not to be said we allow our kids in toxic or dangerous or bullying situations. Not at all. You knew the friends that he was with, is they were not going to lead him down a different path, because we know some of our kids are very susceptible to being led along. And so knowing that group, knowing his friends, you knew the parents, you knew the kids. So this was a safe environment to back off and not be in the middle. Not every environment is like that. And dang it all, I wish I could give you a formula to tell you what to do in each situation, that it would be revealed that there's some algebraic thing that, okay, going to be safe for this one, this time, this month, this is good, whereas next month it's not. I don't. It's taking chances. And I know with my guy, I don't think I took as many chances as I could have. I think I probably could have taken more chances, let him experience more than I did. And now trying to figure that out as an adult.
And you know, Tim, you saying that is reminding me of something that we've, unfortunately, through a news story many years ago, we've made a very high priority in asking, not only here at home, whatever therapies our son accesses here at home, but also in his education environment, because hopefully by bringing it up there, more students are exposed to it. And that's was your question before this, you know, what exposures and so forth. And what you just said reminded me of all of this, is that a controlled exposure for them to have processing time. So your first question was, when did we start thinking of this? Well, I'm going to be honest, not soon enough. I do feel like we're behind the eight ball, even knowing what we're doing, right? So, but that's because I know our son's processing and comfort level time to learn things and absorb them, right? So take the question of exposure, take the question of when did we start, take the question of what do we want them to know through this transition process from childhood to adulthood, okay? And now start using those tools and those things that we all are exposed to every day. The scam calls, the mailers in the mail of, you know, free, well, the fine print, you know, the social media things and so forth, all those things that we either have had to learn because we got sucked into a scam, or we just naturally know the way it's worded or presented. Nope, too good to be true, right? And now in this transition talk, let's empower whoever's listening to this to start saying in their IEP meetings, let's have a functional reading goal of all these mailers or these emails that come through. Instead of them going right to a spam, let's actually have our kids read these. Let's have them answer that phone call of, you know, your car warranty, okay? Because like I said, our son is so bought into his iPad that teaching a teenager that a phone is a wonderful thing sounds really weird, right? But every time I show my son his phone, he's like, what do I have to do? And, you know, I'm like, it's ringing. And he looks at it and goes, I don't know that number. I'm like,
Right.
so answer it. And he'll look at me and goes, whatever's on the other end, right? And I said, so what should you do?
Yeah.
These are all part of this transition process that are, what do they call it? The unwritten rules? Is that what it's called? Like some of the social things and so forth.
Yeah.
But these are the things that, unfortunately, I think some of our loved ones will either get entrapped with or get so protected against that we shouldn't. We should ask the education environments to start exposing our kids to these things. All kids. I want my
Mhm.
neurotypical daughters exposed to these.
Yeah, because we don't know how people learn until we watch how they learn. And so there may be things that our neurotypical kiddos are not picking up on either, that we're just
Right.
making assumptions.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and start to wrap this up. I am also noticing happened earlier to me is that my computer is being really kind of weird right now with Zoom. And so I may or may not be able to end this recording. It may be recorded forever and it just may continue to record me because all sorts of controls are now gone from my screen. They just disappeared. But what I do want to ask is that I know that there are some parents and families out there that when we say, when you start transition, what do you need to start with transition, probably are hoping for a little bit more nuts and bolts than dream, watch, learn, be a detective with your kid to figure out what their interests are, grow those interests, expose them to things in the world as best you can on their timeline. As I've always joked about, Hunter has his own timeline. He doesn't follow what the school says he should be doing. He doesn't follow what the world says he should be doing. He's on his timeline and he's going to do it, but he's going to do it when he is ready, when he feels confident and prepared and able to do it. Driving would be one example. But I'm hoping that maybe we can find one of these Wednesdays in maybe December that we can come back and talk a little bit more about okay, you move from middle school into high school. Okay, what is high school? When high school starts to talk transition, what are they talking about? Because there's just this whole world of employment, of higher education, of living on your own, of personal living skills, of healthcare, that these are all like elements of transition. And there's really not one place that talks about all of them. And a lot of times you go to one place and they don't even let you know about the other ones. It's all about whatever they're doing. And you can leave thinking, oh, okay, I've got transition covered because I talked employment with DVR, and which if you don't know what those mean, come back in December and we'll tell you what the acronyms mean. But I have it covered. And then you talk to a parent and you're like, oh, there's this area over here that I didn't know anything about because this person didn't tell me about it. So you're constantly like relearning stuff. So will you come back in December and we can talk a little bit more about some of the nuts and bolts?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Well, thank you very much. This is normally where I would put the link to the feedback form, but I can't in the chat. I would also put the link for upcoming community conversations into the chat, but I can't. So I will verbally say that we will be back next Wednesday, which in case you're wondering what this Wednesday is, we're on October 13th. And so October 20th, we're going to be back with someone from Wisconsin Family Ties. We're going to talk about what that organization does in Wisconsin, their support for children, youth, young adults with social, emotional, behavioral, and mental health challenges. Going to do a little preview of their upcoming conference that is going to be hybrid. You don't have to go, but if you want to go, you can go, or you can watch it at home virtually. They're just a really cool organization, so I'm looking forward to talking to them. So Rose, again, thank you. Someday I will be back in Southwest Wisconsin.
Sounds good.
So thank you so much for being here. Have a great rest of the day. And I'm going to try to figure out how to stop the recording.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Can I do it for you?
I don't know if I could make you